Hello and welcome to Logan Sounds Off. Today on my podcast, I am talking to one of the most interesting people on the Irish music scene at the moment, who's played with Thumper and much more, Oisín Leahy Furlong. How are you, Oisín?
Hello, how are you?
I am brilliant, thank you for asking. So for those who don't know you or your band Thumper, could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure, yeah. Play in Thumper. Thumper is like a kind of a six-piece psych rock noise pop weird little group of strange humans. And yeah, we've been going for a few years. Brought out our first record there about a year and a half ago after many little EPs and tapes and stuff. And then kind of more recently, I've been putting out singles leading up to my first solo record under the name Anamoe Drive, which is sort of a different buzz, kind of more uh lo-fi, Sparkle Horse, Daniel Johnston, you know, that sort of thing. So those are currently the two main feathers to my bow.
Brilliant. And both bands, I know Anamoe Drive and Thumper, they're both very different, yet just incredible. So actually, growing up, you listened to various bands and musicians. Like there was a massive kind of nearly a palette of music there. But I read that you had nearly a eureka moment when you heard Nirvana. And could you explain further what it kind of felt when you first heard them?
Yeah, well, there was a couple of bands around that time. I think possibly the main actual eureka moment was when I first heard American Idiot by Green Day, which came out when I was 11 years old in 2004. Before that, I was into music, but I don't know, I was never going to be what I did. I was actually really into kind of art and drawing and illustrating and all that sort of stuff. But then I heard that song and you know, the age I was at and the music group listening to, there's obviously a big lineage of bands leading up to Green Day that I'd never heard of. So when I first heard them, it was like an alien coming down, you know. It was so immediate and it was so poppy and sort of accessible. And there's kind of just enough depth there to kind of yeah, keep me interested. But through getting into Green Day, I was like, okay, well, who were they influenced by? What was going on in the early 90s? And eventually got into Nirvana and Kurt Cobain. Uh, they kind of had everything that I could possibly want in a group in a lot of ways. You know, their music, their songwriting was so um special and so kind of effortless, you know. I think you can listen to it with a level of naivety, but you can also listen to it with a level of scrutiny, and it kind of passes both tests, you know. And then on top of that, Kurt Cobain is sort of um, his philosophies on life, especially his sort of gender politics, and he was talking about um, feminism and LGBTQ issues and stuff way before you know he was even in the zeitgeist when I was listening to those records 10 years later, you know. So those two things coupled for me really lit something in me that arguably is still kind of lit today.
That is very interesting and it's a lot of people for Nirvana, they got into Nirvana and then Foo Fighters, but it just shows how much of a music fan you are that you were working backwards through inspirations to find Nirvana. And even Green Day's American Idiot is a great album as well. But apart from Nirvana and Green Day, and I know you listen to much more, what kind of music inspiration did you have at the time? What genres were you looking out for?
Well, I think um, it, I think a lot of the appeal from the get-go with that band was just sort of the immediacy of it, you know, and how you could listen to 3 minutes of music and just be like, right, I'm a lifelong fan, you know. And like I said, it sort of lit something musically in me and passion wise, and really altered the whole trajectory of my life. I was like, right, I'm gonna be a musician. I'm going to be a songwriter. I'm going to be a singer, even though it would take me many, many more years to learn how to sing properly. It's an ongoing battle. But I actually, a lot of the time, found myself gravitating towards songs like Dumb and Polly and the whole Unplugged record. I loved, and it seemed somehow more uh, achievable because I didn't couldn't see myself commanding a stage in that way, or I didn't see myself as having that big a personality or something. There's just something about the softer songs that kind of really gravitate towards me. And I think through that I started getting into like I said, Daniel Johnston, there's like Moldy Peaches and Adam Green and Jeffrey Lewis, all these kind of New York anti-folk people. And then again, just kind of going backwards and backwards and backwards, I was getting into Bob Dylan. And so yeah, I actually ended up kind of almost being more into the sort of folk end of the spectrum for a lot of my teenage years. And I think in my mind's eye that that's where I thought I was going to go to end up. And I fancied myself a bit of a bard. Um, there's an Irish songwriter called Fionn Regan. I don't know if you've ever listened to Fionn Regan's music before.
No, I've actually never heard of him.
So he has an amazing album that you should check out called The End of History, which came out I want to say maybe 2006, 2007. Really, really incredible songwriting, uh, sort of finger picking style with really sort of obtuse metaphorical lyrics that were so dense. I just could never understand what he was talking about, but that kind of gave it a mystery that I loved. And that's sort of what I wanted to be. That's what I kind of he was my archetype for a while, and Elliott Smith and all those. So yeah, it was a long, long road before I stripped it back or built it up, whatever way, and looked at the Thumper sound.
That is super cool. And I know personally, I love Nirvana and I actually loved the Unplugged album myself as well. It was one of the first records I ever bought. And there is a kind of, there's a deeper sound to Unplugged because it feels more kind of realistic. So I think that's a really cool album to get into and lead on to even folk music. That's very interesting. And now, this is something that I personally connected with, where he said you also spoke about Sonic Youth in some past interviews, and you love their melody. And how does that influence your music today? Because I personally love the melody of Sonic Youth and their sound, but how does it influence the kind of music that you create, whether it be from Anamoe Drive or with Thumper?
Well, I think my favorite eras of Sonic Youth are like, well, Daydream Nation is my favorite album for sure. And I love the whole early 90s like major label most accessible version of Sonic Youth. I've listened to all the records and I love a lot of them, especially the latter day ones are really, really quite good. Well, I'm always through the noise and through what can appear as quite abrasive. I'm always like searching for the melody and the kind of that sweet sort of center to it all. And I think in most of the bands I love, they have that. And potentially in a lot of the music I make myself sort of has that. It might seem sort of harsh or scary on the outside, but fundamentally it's coming from quite a sensitive place. Um, and again, there's a level with Sonic Youth. They're so mysterious in what they're creating. I can see the tools they're using, They're just using a drum kit and guitars and their voice. There's no glockenspiel or tuba or synthesizers or whatever. It's like I have all those tools and I can't
Yeah.
even begin to approximate what they're doing with it. They're not even, a lot of what they're doing is so physical. They have big pedal boards that they barely touch sometimes. It's like they're ringing this sound out of nowhere. And so yeah, there's something about that mystery um that especially the older I get and the more I kind of know ultimately about music and you can sometimes you just you get attracted to stuff that you just don't understand. I don't understand how they get to some of those places.
I completely agree. I know I once saw Sonic Youth, I think was live. They just came into this studio and they just played. And I remember one of them was holding a guitar, and they got out a string and or a bow, and they started actually playing the guitar with the bow. And I know their latest album, In Out In, is incredible. And I know they've got a new album coming out soon, which I'm very excited for. And they also had this SYR series. And I remember when I first listened to them, they just confused me so much. And I think, like, I myself play guitar, but they actually give a whole new input on how to play guitar. And then, uh, did you always want to, from all these different incredibly influential and inspirational and very musically bound groups, did you always want to start a band and write music with other people?
I think so. I think even though I kind of quite quickly went down the route of like a lot of these solo artists, like I mentioned, Elliott Smith, et cetera, et cetera. A lot of my favorite music by them was the product of an ensemble. If you listen to like Jeff Buckley, or you listen to Bob Dylan, or you listen to that Fionn Regan album, it's not actually like this chap going out by himself and firing everyone and producing and pressing. I love the process of collaborating. I think you always get something much more interesting from being twisted away from your own instincts. Um, and so yeah, I pretty quickly after starting to learn guitar, I was like trying to get bands together. I was doing little talent shows at school. I was doing Nirvana covers at those a lot of the times, or Pixie songs or whatever. Um, and everything I ever learned musically, I think always was in service of just wanting to create something new. I never wanted to learn any technique or of any sort of piece of equipment or fancy pedals or anything if I couldn't utilize it for my own creative needs, which for a while actually was to my detriment because I just wouldn't want to practice. I'd be like, oh, I don't need to do some crazy guitar solo because it's just not like, where's the song in that? I'm always in search of the song. So yeah, in that sense, I did kind of always want to be in a band. I'm not sure I knew I had what it took to be the front man of a band or the whatever. But that said, I've been doing it on and off for years now, so there must be something to it.
Wow. And then like when you started Thumper, and they've done so much since they've started, what type of way were you thinking of going out with the band? Did you always originally think because there are multiple different bands with two drummers, you got the Doobie Brothers, you've got as well Grateful Dead, and I know Ned's Atomic Dustbin sometimes have two drummers, but it's a very odd thing to have two drummers. And not only that, you also have a bass guitarist and I believe three guitarists. That is an incredible mix of musicians. Did you always picture this particular sound?
Well, so the first I put out three tapes under the name Thumper at a period of writer's block, kind of when I started studying music because I sort of lost the magic of it a little bit. And so I just like joined other bands. I stayed in the background for a while. And then I started putting out these tapes called Thumper. I had it under not my own name, so that I kind of wouldn't be accountable for the material there, if you know what I mean. So I could just like put it out, not worry about it, just push it out, and then it would unblock me, you know what I mean? But when I started
Oh,
putting it out, there was immediacy to it that I was like, oh, actually, this isn't just like an exercise. This is, I'm creating something that's very felt a lot more unpretentious than I've been doing before, and just sort of from a really pure place. And I think immediately other people picked up on that as well, is my feeling, because immediately started getting booked for festivals. But of course, I had no band. I just recorded everything myself on the tapes. That's not to say I'm some sort of virtuoso. If you actually hear those tapes, they sound like a complete crap, and I'm just like wailing away. Um, but like I said, I'm not like a born front man. I think when I get on stage, I exercise some sort of inner demon or some sort of push down extrovert that doesn't actually exist in my normal day-to-day life. So what I did was I basically got as many musicians as I possibly could to surround me, and I'd be just like in the mix, not like the guy, not the focal point. I'd have two drummers. One of the first festivals, if not the first festival or first gig we ever did, was for this festival called Knockenstocken, which was um in Blessington. Amazing community, went on for years and years. It's been gone now for a few years, unfortunately. But at that gig, I had possibly 10 or 11 people on stage. Um, and actually, Alan, who plays guitar in Thumper now, wasn't in the band back then, but I pulled him out from some other band that he was playing with to make him come on stage with us and play. Um, and yeah, it was literally just born from a place of I want to make a gigantic noise. I want to be Nirvana, essentially, but I don't want to be the focal point. Uh, and so yeah, it came from a very insecure place.
Wow.
Um, And the other thing about that was back in those days, we were kind of this like Sonic Youth noise, way more caustic sort of endeavor where I had songs, there was the pop element, but I was almost like embarrassed of it. So at the end of every gig, we'd be just like trashing the place. It'd be like guitars getting broken, there'd be feedback, there'd be just walls and walls of noise. And after a while, I just started feeling a bit like a dancing monkey, like it had nothing to do with music or songwriting, which is my ultimate passion. So yeah, did end up, even though it's a big band, it was pared back from the brink, and uh yeah, a, a big thing with us is just to never make it feel like our size is a novelty. I always want to justify every person who's actually on stage. So I feel like the two drummers and the three guitarists, while it is sort of a funny setup, I feel like if you come see us, you understand why every person is there.
Wow. I think that's a really incredible way to explain such a really cool band. And I know with Sonic Youth, what I always liked about Sonic Youth and what I actually like about Thumper is they don't worry about finishing a song. I know there's a lot of bands who I always think of as nearly a radio band who make specific 3-minute songs just for radio, and that's all they do. Thumper instead have much longer songs, but they feel like finished pieces of work instead of very short songs with the certain elements to them. And regarding some of these songs, I love the Overbite suite on the most recent LP. I think it's brilliant. But for those who aren't familiar with your new album and aren't familiar with that particular suite, could you explain what the Overbite suite is all about?
Yeah. So the Overbite Suite, as we've come to start calling it, that whole album it's called Illusions of Grandeur, and it's kind of it's somewhat it pertains to some of the lyrical themes, but it also is sort of a tongue-in-cheek reference to the fact that it's our first album, yet it's a double album, and like it's almost like we're some sort of legacy act, like we're ending our album with this like I don't know how long that song is, like 15 minutes long or something. Uh,
Mad.
it's kind of a ridiculous thing to do, and certainly our management at the time would have loved for us to have a couple more 3-minute radio bangers, but that's not something that I could offer, unfortunately. Um, and yeah, with that song in particular, it's sort of we recorded it as one long thing. It's broken down into 3 tracks on the album, and it was a lot. I think it's important to up until COVID, like our main the reason that people come see us is because we put on a good live show. It's all about seeing us live, 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 live. And then during COVID, it was I didn't know whether we'd ever get to do it again, play live, or what the future of the band would be. And so it was really important that the record stood on its own 2 feet. Like someone put it on and not be like, oh, this is good, but wait until you hear it live. I wanted you to be able to listen to it and and really, really feel it. And then for us to be like, this is great. How the hell are we going to do this live? I didn't worry about how many guitars were on a song, how many overdubs. There wasn't like some punk rock, like, one guitar, no overdubs. I wanted it to feel like it's just an absolute assault. And so in that spirit, that song was very much like, how do we push ourselves even further past the structures of what people expect from us, what people maybe even want from us. Um, that last song on the record, the last part of that Down in Heaven is sort of treading quite intense emotional places that again I don't think we were necessarily associated with. Um, and so yeah, in some ways it's become a calling card, in other ways it's a complete outlier to everything we've ever really done. But it's I kind of hope that's what I'm always trying to do is reach outside of the comfort zone just a little bit every time, while still delivering something that's ultimately pop music.
That is really, really cool. And I know myself, I love the newest album. I mean, I love even Fear of Art, which is nearly uh one of the most popular tracks in the album. It's really, really cool. And if you haven't heard Delusions of Grandeur, definitely check out Thumper's music. And I know as well Thumper has an EP and a couple of singles that is well along with the album. So I'd make sure to have a listen to that. And if you're a record collector like me, make sure to buy their records as well. But now we were mentioning there about the band and the way it's just such a crazy setup. So did you find it difficult nearly to write the tracks with this unique sound, nearly trying to organize, well, not organize, but write all the different ways that it was nearly going to be played on the album with all the different instruments?
I would say the opposite would be true, that I would find it very difficult to write any other way. Like the problem is that every time I write a song, there's so many bells and whistles, and it's almost like this jigsaw that's living in my head that I know it's all going to fit together. I just have to will it into existence. Fear of Art is a kind of good example, early example of this, where it's all like single notes on the guitar that are like moving to create different chords at a time, almost like a brass band or something. Um, which is, I would say, the first time I came across someone doing that. If it wasn't Sonic Youth, it was. Do you ever listen to Glenn Branca? Do you ever listen to his
No,
music?
no,
So the way that Thurston Moore and Lee Ranaldo from Sonic Youth met is that they were in an experimental, like no wave guitar orchestra in New York, that was kind of organized. The creative mind behind it was this guy called Glenn Branca who passed away a few years ago. Um, but he would do things like have, say, there's seven people there. He'd have every single person tune all of their strings to one note and have every single person play the same note or something, And then when you make tiny little shifts away from that, suddenly it's like this. The stereo field is really really affected. You can feel it, but it's almost like not musical. It's something else. And so fast forward 30 years later, I'm doing a very kind of Disney version of that with my little song. But all that to say, I love the studio. I love building it up, and I love, like I said, justifying all the moving parts and actually just worrying about it later. Because as you know, the live show is a kind of a different thing altogether. Then I don't really, uh, yeah, you just make the best music you possibly can right down there, and then you worry about it later on.
like you were saying there that it's for you, it's kind of no, I'm not going to say handy, but it's a lot simpler to kind of write music with that kind of band. But you also have Anamoe Drive, and that's just you. And I know I believe it's the 8th of March this year, 2024, and Anamoe Drive is releasing the first album. I'm very excited. and I can't wait to have a listen. But um, do you find it hard to write music yourself, or do you find it's not hard but something nearly something else?
Well, in a sense, I'm always writing it by myself. It's just that when I bring it to a thumper song to the band, I know that it's going to be made better by their involvement. So even it's no two songs are the same, but even if I'm like, okay, you do this, 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 it'll come together. And then like that jigsaw I was talking about, but they're all way better than me. So they'll go, yeah, I could do it that way, or I can do it this way. And you're like, oh yeah, sick. And then all these little micro changes, and suddenly it's actually not what you had intended, but it's something better. But it's still kind of coming from a core idea that it will start off in this bedroom or whatever on a guitar. Um, and similarly with the Anamoe stuff, it is it was all well, it was me and a guy called Rian Trench produced it. I met Rian. He did the initial sessions for Delusions of Grandeur in 2019. We didn't end up using most of what we did in the studio. We kept a lot of the drums and stuff. But me and him got on really well. He owns a studio and produces bands, Saint Sister, lots of cool acts. And so I had him in the back of my head for this thing, and I was starting to amass a bunch of material that just sort of, at that time I felt wasn't going to fit in the Thumper extended universe. Um, and yeah, so even though it is a solo vehicle, quote unquote, there's still, I was going in collaborating. I was still like, what do you think of this? And you go, cool. Da, da, da. And you go, what do you think of this? I don't know. What about this? There's a dialogue there. Um, and part of that as well is just keeping me accountable. I get so bored of my own ideas sometimes that I need someone to be like, no, do it like, do it, but do it better. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, it's not that I can't. Maybe it is that I can't. I've never actually put out something that I did totally by myself. Is there? No, that's true. I did 3 Thumper tapes by myself, and I was like, yeah, it's enough. I need to get some other guys and girls involved with this.
Wow, that I just that's great though that you have two, like, because I've spoken to, even this year I spoke to a man called Johnny Foster, plays with a band called Hardwick Circus. And if you haven't heard of them, I definitely check them out. But no, the thing was with a lot of the bands was there were certain ways that, especially if they were solo musicians as well, they had a lot of specific ways, and a lot of people had very similar ways. But that's a very unique way of writing music. And now back to Thumper with Delusions of Grandeur. It's not just me saying it's a great album. A lot of people are, because this was actually nominated for the Irish Album of the Year at the 2023 Choice Prize. What was this like, your album being nominated for such an incredible award?
Uh, it was pretty pretty wild. I think everyone, ourselves, our management, and almost every journalist I spoke to was pretty surprised that we were on that list, considering how much great music came out. Um, so very uh pleasantly surprised to be included. Yeah, I think it certainly wasn't something we ever aimed for, and it's not something we're thinking about now that we're working on the second album. But it was kind of a nice just bit of cosmic proof that if you just stick to your guns on what you think will make an interesting piece of art, I don't know, the audience will find because so many people said, like the label we were working at the time, their distributor, were like, please don't make this a double album. The songs are too long. Some of them are then really short. It's too this, it's too that. And I just had to like completely block everyone out and be like, this is, fortunately, this is exactly what I'm going to do. And you can't stop me. Now, yeah, I don't know. It was a proud moment, and I was really proud to be on that list because there's so much amazing music, and the direction the Choice Prize is going is really cool because even this year again, you can see it's gotten even more diverse, even more just interesting, you know. And I think it says a lot about the health of the Irish music scene at the minute. So just yeah, really proud to kind of be in that mix.
Well, in all fairness, you're saying there was so much amazing music. You definitely deserve to be nominated. And I mean, as well, you're saying the health of Irish music at the moment. You're totally contributing to that. And it's great to be able to speak to you about this. But I have two questions. And you're mentioning there about so much Irish music coming out, great Irish music. Are there any upcoming Irish bands who you've heard of who might not be as well known who you'd like to shout out at the moment?
Yes, I always hate when this question gets asked in interviews because it's always after the fact. I'm like, oh, I should have said them. I should have said them. Um, but one person I always shout out is a guy called Joey Gavin who brought out his debut album about 2 or 3 years ago. He was the original bass player in Thumper way back when, and myself and Alan played a bit on the record and stuff. It's called Between the Mountains and the Mystery by Joey Gavin. He's living in Berlin, running art space over there, doing gigs and stuff. Incredible, like sort of psyche folk music that if you haven't heard, you should definitely check out. Um, there's a great artist called Ainer, Aonair, who's putting out like 80s inspired, like Tears for Fears esque synthy bangers. And I know for a fact he's putting the finishing touches on an amazing record at the minute, but he has some release stuff that's absolutely incredible too. And then my final recommendation would be there's an incredible singer-songwriter called Holly Monroe who's putting out kind of lo-fi, mid-fi adjacent, just solid songs in the vein of, I don't know, Frankie Cosmos, Big Thief-esque. All of those people are huge inspirations to me, and deserve to be heard more.
Perfect. Well, there you go. I know I haven't heard any of them, so I'm going to have a listen, and you should too. So before we go, Oisín, I just want to ask you, for guitarists or even people who I know you attended BIM, for people who are going into BIM or just want to are starting a band, releasing their first demo tape or EP or anything, what advice would you give them, and what tips would you give them?
Um, I would say don't be precious. Make deadlines for yourself that you have to meet. Just do it because there will always be someone interested in listening to what you have to say and have to sing or play. Um, don't wait to amass all of your best material for a decade and then bring out your solo album. Just record the thing, put it out, move on, record the thing, put it out, move it on. And through that process, you will find what it is you're trying to do. Um, don't be afraid to fail in front of people over and over and over again because most people aren't doing it at all. Uh, and so even the process of doing it and failing it or thinking you're going to fail and then arriving at it and going, oh, I actually succeeded in everything I wanted to do with this. How can I make it better next time? And don't forget that you love it.
That
That's a good one.
That's brilliant advice there. Um, so Oisín, you've given me some incredible answers. I know you spoke about a lot of bands and musicians who I'm definitely going to check out, and I've just found this a really cool experience. So thank you so much for joining me on my podcast.
Logan, you're doing great work. Really appreciate you having me on. And yeah, if you want a little preview of the Anamoe record, I'll send it on to you. As long as
Oh,
you don't share it with anyone.
oh, I won't. Thank you so
Um,
much, Oisín.
and yeah,
And
anything in the future, just get in touch, man. You're doing a great
I
job.
I'll make sure. And when the Animal record comes out, I'll make sure to share it on my social media. But if you yourself want to listen to Anamoe Drive's new album, it will be released on March 8th, 2024. Thank you so much for listening and have a great day. Bye,
Nice one.
Oisín.
Thanks. Cheers.